example, we're going to look at how to size water supply lines. And the first thing that we have to do is go through and give fixture unit values to each one of these fixtures. We could also use GPMs. And fixture units are basically whenever they're looking at the demand of the fixtures, how it's like a fuzzy math number that tells you how much the fixture is actually going to be used, and the assumption is that not all the fixtures within the building are going to be used at the exact same time. So whenever we start out, the first question that we have to ask anytime we're sizing a plumbing system is whether or not the toilets are flush valve or flush tank. This is a commercial building. We're going to use flush valves for this situation. So we can real quickly go through, find out what all the fixture unit values are for those. So looking at this chart, we find water closets. Down at the bottom we have private, private, public, public, public or private, and we are going to use the flush valve, and the cold water fixture units are 10 for this. And just go to the top so you can see what we have. We have 10 water supply fixture units. So at this point I would just go through and I would start labeling all the different fixture units. And I'm going to use blue for cold water and red for hot water, so I don't have to worry about getting them mixed up. And the only difference here on this for WCH, that's a handicap accessible water closet, and the WCs are not. So we have 10 for those three. Now we have to find out what labs and urinals are rated at. So the lavatories are 0.5 for each cold water and hot water, and urinals, public urinals, flush valves are either 5 or 10. We don't know whether we're going to use a 1-inch flush valve or a 3/4-inch flush valve. What we would want to do is we'd want to take a look at our cut sheets and find out which one we're actually going to use. For this instance, we're going to choose the 10, and we're better to be oversized than undersized for our plumbing lines. So we have 10 for the urinals and 0.5 for the labs. So after I have them written in, I can start adding them up. And what I mean by adding them up is basically the water is going to be coming down from this line right here. We have the water coming in, cold water coming in. At this point, it's going to come in at the basement, and then it's going to come up through this chase, and this is the last place that it's going to go, to this second floor. So at this point, I have 20. At this point, I have 40. At this point, I have 40.5. At this point, I have 50.5. I'm just adding them up as I go. And at that point I have 60.5. And then right here I have 0.5. Right here I have 1. So at this point right here I have 61.5 cold water fixture units. .5 cold water fixture units at that point right there. And at the same time right here I have 61.5. Okay, so what I noticed is the lavatory, I used the private instead of public, and the lavatory is 1.5. So we'll just real quickly go in and adjust our numbers for that. Okay, so we went ahead and updated all of our numbers, went up with 64.5. What we can do with that is we can take our sizing chart here. So we can take our sizing chart and lay it down here, and what we're really looking for is the 64.5 fixture units. And we have a few different things on here. The first thing is over here on the left hand side, friction loss rate, PSI per 100 feet of linear feet. Down here at the bottom, hot water fixture units and or cold water fixture units with flush tanks. We also have a section that's crossed out for GPM, demand GPM, probability flow rate. And up above here we have cold water fixture units with flush valves only. So once you get into flush valves, the whole system needs to be sized according to this chart. At least any part of the system that has flush valves on it. So whenever we're basically looking for 64. So whenever I come in here, 64 is somewhere in this vicinity. So it lines up with this line. And if I wanted to, I could stop. Before we get any further, what you can see are these lines right here that are shaded in yellow. That is the velocity. That's how fast the water's moving. You can see 3 feet per second, 4 feet per second, 6 feet per second, goes all the way up to 10, 15 feet per second. What I've done is I've highlighted in yellow where we are minimum and maximum. We really don't want to go above 8 feet per second if we don't have to. Just you start to get pipe erosion, you start to get water hammer, noisy pipes. So we want to stay down below 8 feet per second and above 3 feet per second, somewhere in this range. The next ones that you need to look at are the pipe sizes. So over here we start out with a 3/8 inch pipe, and we basically have three different types. We have K, L, and M. And whenever we're talking about copper pipe, there's three different types of copper pipe, and it really on the smoothness of the pipe. We have 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch, 1 1/2 inch, 2 inch, 2 1/2 inch. It goes all the way down to 6 inch line size. So up above, whenever we're looking at 60, basically what we want to do is we want to work our way down, and we want to fall somewhere within the range of the yellow highlighted velocities. Whenever I do that, I end up falling onto the 2 inch line. If I were going to use 1 1/2 inch, I would be all the way up near 10 feet, 12 feet per second where it intersects, and probably be at 12 feet per second, and that's just too high of a velocity. So we're going to stick with the 2 inch line size for the 64.5 fixture units. And again, that column at the top, that is for cold water fixture units with flush valves only. So if we were using flush tanks, it'd be significantly lower. And you can see that whenever you look at the chart at the bottom. 60 is far left, and whenever I come up and hit the smallest pipe, I can basically fall within the 1 1/2 inch range instead of the 2 inch range. The other aspect is I would really only have about 30 fixture units because the flush tanks would be listed as 5 instead of 10. So my total fixture units for that floor would be around 30, which would get me closer to 1 1/4 inch or possibly even 1 inch line size instead of the full 2-inch. So it's important to note that whenever you go with flush valves, it's not just the extra expense of the flush valves, it's also the expense of the total system. You're really doubling the size of your system in some cases. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and write those right on the drawing, and then I'll use this drawing to go back onto CAD and start labeling the drawing whenever I have the entire thing sized. So back at this level where I have the start of the run, I have 20, and if I come over to 20 and I drop down, I can really end up choosing a 1.5 inch line size. I'll just write that in, 1.5 inch. And the next one is going to be up to 40. And I can also look at the individual line sizes. I know from the plumbing, International Plumbing Code, I have a minimum line size, I believe, for flush valves of 1 inch. And I can also look at the fixture cut sheet whenever I actually choose the actual water closet out that I'm going to use, and it should tell me what the line size is. And that should be a 1 inch line. I've seen them as high as 1.25 inches though. So I go back to my 40, I drop down, and I have 2 inch line size whenever I fall into the 40 cold water fixture units. And I end up with the 2 inch line. So the nice thing about going back and forth between those two is on the one end I ended up at 2 inch where the 40 is, and then I ended up at 2 inch on the other side, so I know that everything in between is going to be 2 inch also. So I have 2 inch from the 40 to the 64.5. I can just go ahead and write those in the rest of the way. And again, this is just for the cold water that I'm working with. Whenever I actually start looking at the rest of them, the hot water, it's going to be very similar to the area that I'm circling right now. It does not have any flush valves on it, so I don't have to use the column or the chart that is for flush valves. I can use the flush tank one, and that's going to get me a little bit smaller line size. So I do the same thing with the hot water system. I have no influence of flush valves there, and that's basically what this bottom chart is for. That's for hot water fixture units or cold water fixture units without flush valves or with flush tanks. So whenever I look at 3, I could literally end up with a 3/8 inch line, but we're going to use a minimum pipe size of a 1/2 inch. The only place that I would end up using a 3/8 inch line might be something like a ice maker in a refrigerator. The actual supply connections going from the pipe to the actual fixture itself are after the stops. I'm going to use a minimum of a 1/2 inch, and that works pretty well the whole way up to 7. So once you start sizing some lines, you can really start to see, okay, well, 1/2 inch is good up to about 7 fixture units, and 3/4 will go up to the next level. So whenever I look back here, I can go ahead and write my line sizes on. I'm just going to go ahead and make those a 1/2 inch. I'm going to go ahead and add the hot water also, because I know there's the same fixture units, so, and I'm using the hot water or flush tank chart now. So I literally have a 1/2 inch line size the whole way throughout for my hot water system and on the right hand side with my lavatories. And we can see we just end up with a 1/2 inch for, like I said, the hot water and the cold water because of that. And I'll just go ahead and label that back there also. The next step, I really went through and I paused the video and went through and added all of the fixture units for both the cold water and the hot water for the basement floor and the first floor. And one of the significant things about this is whenever you look at the hot water system, it's really doesn't have many fixture units. You can see 1.5 on the one side, 7.5 on the other side from a sink and 3 lavatories, because we're not supplying anything to the water closets or urinals, so I ended up with 9, 13.5. One of the big things that I want to make note of is I only ended up with 18 total for the hot water. Now with the cold water, whenever I added the 163.5 and 34.5, I ended up with 198. And then my total was 216. So the question is, how did I end up with 216? Well, what happened was I ended up having to add the hot water fixture units to that also, to the 198, because basically whenever I come into the building with 216 fixture units, I'm going to drop off 18 fixture units to the hot water side. And that's going to leave me with 198 fixture units for the cold water side. I'll basically go out and you can look at it from the standpoint of I have a total of 198. I'm going to go out, I'm going to drop off 34.5 to the basement. That's going to leave me with 163.5 going up to the upper floors. I'm going to drop off 99 to the first floor, and then I'm going to have 64.5 remaining for the last floor.